There is a prayer in the Bible so raw, so human, so far from the calm and certainty we expect of the Son of God, that for centuries some teachers were tempted to soften it, to explain it away, to pretend it did not mean quite what it plainly says. It is the prayer Jesus prayed in a garden in the dark on the last night of his life, hours before the soldiers came. And in that garden, the Gospels tell us, he fell face down on the cold ground. He began to be, in the exact words of the text, deeply distressed and troubled. He said that his soul was crushed with sorrow, sorrow enough to kill a man, and he actually begged, for there to be some other way. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. One ancient account says the anguish grew so terrible that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. For 2,000 years, believers have stood at the edge of this scene, almost afraid to look. Because here is the mystery that will hold you tonight. If Jesus was truly God, why was he afraid? Why did he shake? Why did he plead in the dark to be spared? And what does it mean for you? For your own fear, your own trembling, your own sleepless night, that the strongest one who ever lived once knelt in a garden and was for a while utterly overwhelmed. Maybe you are carrying a dread tonight that you have not spoken to anyone, a fear about tomorrow, a weight that presses hardest exactly at this hour, when the house is quiet and there is nothing left to distract you from it. Maybe you feel completely alone in it, the way you can only feel alone in the middle of the night. Tonight, this ancient story is for you. You don't need to watch. Just close your eyes and listen. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of today go. You are safe here. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The garden called the oil press. Before there was a cross, before there were nails, before there was a crowd screaming outside a governor's palace, there was a quiet garden on a hillside in the dark. And that is where we begin tonight. Not at the loud and terrible place everyone remembers, but at the still, secret place that came just before it. The garden was called Gethsemane. It is a small, humble name, and it tells us more than you might think. The word means, quite literally, oil press, because this was a grove of olive trees on the lower slope of the Mount of Olives, just across a narrow valley from the eastern wall of Jerusalem, and among those ancient, gnarled trees stood a press, a great stone press, where the olives were crushed to bring out their oil. You would gather the fruit and lay it in the press and turn the heavy stone down upon it, and slowly, under enormous weight, the oil would run out. The good thing, the precious thing, the thing that lit the lamps and healed the wounds and anointed the kings, it came only through crushing. Breathe for a moment. Let that name settle into the quiet. The oil press, the place of crushing. Of all the places in all the world where the Son of God could have spent the last free hours of his life, he came here. And it was not by accident, and it was not the first time. The Gospels tell us plainly that Jesus went to this garden often, that it was a familiar place to him and to his friends, a place they had come to many times before to rest and pray and get away from the crowds and the noise of the city. It was, in the truest sense, his place, a quiet olive grove on a hillside, under the stars, where a tired man could breathe, which means that on this last night, when he needed a place to face the worst hours of his life, he did not go somewhere new and strange. He went home, in a way. He went to the familiar trees, the familiar dark, the familiar quiet. There is something tender in that, something we should not rush past. When the deepest trouble of his life came, he sought out a place he already knew, a place already worn smooth by many gentler prayers. Rest here for a moment. Breathe. Rest here for a moment. Breathe. There is one more thing about this garden worth pausing over before we go in. An olive tree is not like other trees. It grows slowly over centuries, and it is almost impossible to kill. You can cut it down to a stump, and it will send up new shoots from the root and live again. You can burn it, and it will come back. Some of the olive trees that stand in that garden today are so old that a few people wonder in quiet awe whether any of them could possibly have been standing on that very night. Almost certainly not. But the roots beneath them may reach back that far, for the olive is a tree that dies and rises, refusing to be finished. And it was under trees like these, trees that knew how to come back from death, that the author of resurrection knelt down to face his own. Breathe. Let that quiet symmetry sit in the dark for a moment. And here is the first small thing I want to leave with you tonight, before the story even truly begins. When trouble comes for us, and it comes for all of us, we do not have to face it in some grand or unfamiliar way. Like him, we can go to the place we already know, the familiar corner, the old worn prayer, the name of God we have said 1,000 times before. You do not need new words tonight. You do not need to be eloquent or strong or certain. You only need to go as he went, to the quiet place, and begin. Because on this night, the man who had walked on water and calmed the storm and raised the dead came to a garden called the oil press, and there, under the olive trees, he was about to be crushed. He came knowing exactly what was coming, and still he came. He is not afraid to be near you in your own hard hour tonight. He has knelt where you are kneeling. You are not alone. You are held. You are loved. You are safe. Think, too, of the setting itself, and let it quiet you. It was night, real night, the deep dark of the ancient world before there were street lights or glowing screens, when the only light was the moon over the valley, and perhaps the far-off glimmer of lamps on the city wall. The air would have been cool, carrying the scent of the olive leaves and the dust of the path. Somewhere an owl, perhaps, or the small sounds a hillside makes at night. And into that darkness the Son of God walked, on purpose, to meet the hardest thing he would ever face. He did not wait for morning. He did not wait for the comfort of daylight. He went into the dark, because that is where the trouble was, and that is where he needed to pray. If you are awake in the dark tonight, know that the dark is not a place he avoids. It is a place he has chosen to enter. He met his own worst hour at night in a garden under the stars, the very hour you may be living now. But first, before the garden, there had been a meal and a road in the dark, and a small band of tired friends who had no idea what the night would hold. Chapter 2. The Road. Across the valley. What does the last ordinary hour before a great sorrow feel like? Usually it does not feel like anything at all. It feels ordinary. That is its terrible mercy and its terrible sting. Just a little while before the garden, Jesus and his closest friends had shared a meal together in an upstairs room in the city. It was the Passover, the most sacred meal of the Jewish year, the meal that remembered how God had once rescued his people out of slavery in the night. And Jesus had done strange and unforgettable things at that table. He had knelt down like a servant and washed their dusty feet one by one, even the feet of the man he knew would betray him. He had taken the bread and broken it and said, "This is my body, given for you." He had taken the cup of wine and said, "This is my blood poured out for you." He had told them quietly that one of them would hand him over, and that all of them would scatter before the night was out. And they had argued even then about which of them was the greatest. So far were they from understanding what was really happening. And then they sang a hymn together, the old Passover songs, and they got up, and they went out into the night. Breathe. Let that image sit for a moment. A small group of men singing in the dark, walking out of the warm lamplight into the cold streets, not one of them truly knowing what was coming. There is something almost unbearably poignant about the singing. On the last night of his life, knowing everything that lay ahead, the betrayal, the arrest, the trials, the cross, Jesus sang. The Passover meal always ended with a set of ancient psalms, songs of praise and of trust in God's deliverance, and among them were lines about being surrounded by the cords of death, about calling on the name of the Lord in distress, about how precious in the sight of God is the death of his faithful ones. Imagine him singing those very words with his friends in the lamplight, hours before they came true in him. He walked toward the hardest night in history with a song still on his lips. Not because he did not feel the weight of it. He was about to show us in the garden exactly how much he felt it, but because trust and dread can live in the same heart at the same time. You can be afraid and still sing. You can walk toward the valley and still worship on the way. Rest here for a moment. Let that settle into the quiet. They went out of the city through a gate in the eastern wall and down into a narrow ravine called the Kidron Valley. There was a brook that ran through the bottom of it, a small dark stream. And here is a haunting detail, the kind of thing the old readers love to notice. On that Passover night, thousands upon thousands of lambs had been sacrificed at the temple, and by ancient tradition, the blood of those sacrifices was channeled away and ran down into the Kidron Brook. So it may well be that as Jesus crossed that little valley in the dark, the Lamb of God himself stepped across a stream that ran red with the blood of lambs, walking toward his own sacrifice, over a shadow of the very thing he was about to become. Rest here for a moment. Let that settle into the quiet. They climbed up the far side of the valley onto the lower slope of the Mount of Olives and came to the garden. And I want you to feel the smallness and the humanness of it. There were no crowds now. No miracles, no teaching, no adoring multitudes, just a handful of exhausted friends, full from the meal, heavy-eyed, following their teacher up a hill in the middle of the night because he wanted to pray. They had done this before. They had no reason yet to think this night was different from any other night in the garden. Sometimes the hardest hours of our lives begin exactly like this, quietly, ordinarily, with no warning bell, no sign in the sky. We walk from the lit room into the dark street, not knowing what waits on the far side of the valley. And if you are lying in the dark tonight, sensing that something hard is coming or already here, some valley you are being asked to cross, then hear this softly. He crossed the valley first. He walked into the dark ahead of you. There is no ravine so deep, no night so black that his footprints are not already in it. You are not walking into anything alone. You are following, not leading, and the one ahead of you has been here before. Because at the entrance to the garden, Jesus stopped and turned to his friends and said something that changed the shape of the night. Chapter 3. Stay here and watch with me. Have you ever needed someone simply to stay near you, not to fix anything, not to say anything wise, just to be there while you went through something hard alone? That is what Jesus asked for, at the edge of the garden, on the worst night of his life. And it is one of the most human moments in all of Scripture. He did not take all of his friends deep into the garden. To most of them he said, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And then he did something revealing. He took with him only 3, Peter, James, and John, the same 3, and this is no accident, who had been with him on the mountain when his face shone like the sun, when they saw him wrapped in glory and heard the voice from the cloud. The three who had seen him at his most radiant, his most divine, his most untouchable, now those same three would see him at his most broken. They had witnessed the glory. Now they would witness the anguish. And perhaps that was the point, that the ones who truly knew him had to know all of him, the shining and the shaking both. Breathe. Let that stay with you a moment. The same eyes that saw the light would now see the darkness. And as they went deeper into the grove, away from the others, something began to happen to Jesus that the disciples had never seen before, not once, in all their years with him. The gospel writers reach for the strongest words they have, and even those words seem to strain. He began to be deeply distressed and troubled. He began to be sorrowful and greatly troubled. One old translation says he was sore amazed, struck with a kind of shuddering horror. This was not the calm teacher who slept through storms in the bottom of a boat. This was a man visibly coming apart at the seams, right in front of them in the dark. And then he said it out loud to his three friends in words that should stop us cold. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Let that land. He was saying that the grief in him was so vast, so crushing, that it felt like it could kill him where he stood, that a man could die of this sorrow alone before any soldier ever laid a hand on him. And then he asked them, simply, almost pleadingly, "Stay here. Watch with me. Do not go far. Do not sleep. Just be near me. Just stay. Rest here for a moment. Breathe slowly. Let your shoulders drop." Think of how much it must have cost him even to say those words. This was the one they all leaned on. The teacher, who always had the answer, who always seemed unshakable, who slept through the storm while they panicked. He was the strong one, the calm one, the one others came to in their fear. And now, in the garden, the strong one was letting his three closest friends see him afraid. He was admitting out loud, "I cannot carry this alone. I need you near me." There is a particular courage in that. The courage to let the people who admire you see you at your weakest. Most of us would rather hide it. Most of us, when the sorrow rises to the point of death, pull away and suffer in secret, ashamed to be seen breaking. But Jesus did not hide it from his friends. He let them in, and in doing so he made it holy for all of us to say the words, "I am not okay. Please stay with me. Breathe." Let that permission settle over you in the dark. There is something in that request that reaches straight across 2,000 years and takes hold of anyone who has ever suffered. Because notice what he asked for. He did not ask them to take his suffering away. They could not have. He did not ask them for advice or answers or comfort in words. He asked only for their presence. Stay with me. Watch with me. In the deepest trouble of his life, what the Son of God wanted from his friends was simply for them to be there, awake, close, in the dark alongside him. And if you have ever wished for exactly that, not to be fixed, not to be lectured, but simply to be accompanied through something no one can carry for you, then you are in the most sacred company tonight. He understands that longing from the inside. He felt it under those olive trees, and here is the tender turn of it. What his friends could not manage to do for him that night, to stay awake, to stay near, he now does perfectly for you. He is the friend who does not fall asleep. He is the one who stays and watches with you through the long hours when everyone else has drifted off. You are not watching alone tonight. You are not alone. You are held. You are loved. You are safe. But now Jesus went a little farther, just a stone's throw beyond even those three, and there, alone, he fell to the ground. Chapter 4. The cup. He begged to pass. What does it look like when the strongest one who ever lived comes to the very end of his strength? Here, in the deep of the garden, we are about to see it. And we should take our sandals off in a way, because this is holy and terrible ground. He went a little beyond his 3 friends. About a stone's throw, the Gospel says, a small and heartbreaking distance, close enough to call out to, and yet utterly alone. And there, in the dark, among the twisted trunks of the ancient olive trees, Jesus did not kneel with dignity. He fell to the ground face down on the cold earth, and he began to pray. And the prayer that came out of him was not a calm and formal prayer. It was a cry. "Abba, Father," he said, using the most intimate word a child could use, the word a little one uses for a daddy who is trusted completely. "Everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me." And then, in the same breath, the words that hold the whole universe in tension, "Yet not what I will, but what you will." Breathe. Let that prayer hang in the dark for a moment, the way it hung over that garden. "Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Notice the very first word of it, before anything else, because it carries so much. Abba. It is an Aramaic word. The ordinary, everyday word a small child would use for a father. Warm, close, unguarded, the first sound of trust a little one ever learns. Of all the ways he could have addressed the Almighty in that terrible hour, he did not reach for a grand or formal title. He reached for the word of a child, crawling into a parent's lap in the dark. And that tells us something about where to go when we are most afraid. Not up to some distant and formal deity we must impress, but close into the lap of a Father who can be trusted with our worst terror. The more afraid he was, the closer he drew. Fear did not drive him from the Father. It drove him deeper in. We have to stop and ask what this cup was, because it is the heart of everything. In the old scriptures, the cup was a rich and terrible image. Again and again the prophets spoke of a cup that God's own hand would give, a cup filled to the brim with sorrow, with judgment, with the full weight of everything that had gone wrong in the world. To drink the cup was to take all of that into yourself, down to the last bitter drop, and Jesus, kneeling in the dark, could see that cup being lifted toward him. He was not merely afraid of the physical horror waiting for him, though that was real enough, the whips, the nails, the slow agony of the cross. He was staring at something far heavier than pain. He was about to take into himself the whole crushing weight of a broken world's brokenness, and to feel, for the first time in all eternity, the horror of being cut off from his Father in that darkness. That was the cup, and his whole being recoiled from it. Rest here. Let that be as heavy as it is. And there is one more layer to the cup that makes what he did even more astonishing. In the same scriptures that spoke of the cup of sorrow, there was also spoken of, again and again, a different cup. The cup of blessing, the cup that overflows, the cup a gracious host fills to the brim for a beloved guest. "My cup runs over," sang the Shepherd King. The cup was meant to be a symbol of abundance, of joy, of being cared for and filled. And what Jesus does in this garden, in a sense, is take the bitter cup so that we might one day be handed the cup that overflows. He drinks the sorrow so that the blessing can be poured out for us. He accepts the cup no one would ever choose, so that we might be offered the cup we could never have earned. That is the exchange being decided, there in the dark, among the olive trees. And he decided it not from a throne, not in glory, but face down on the ground, trembling one honest, agonized prayer at a time. Breathe. Let that gift settle into the quiet. And here is what I most want you to understand tonight. Resting in the quiet. When Jesus begged for the cup to pass, he was not sinning and he was not failing. It was not weak of him to ask. It was the most honest prayer ever prayed. He wanted with everything human in him for there to be another way. And he said so out loud to his Father. He did not pretend to be fine. He did not bury the dread beneath a brave face. He named the terror exactly as it was, and he asked plainly for it to be taken away. And only then, having told the whole truth of his fear, did he add the words of surrender, "Yet not my will, but yours." That order matters more than almost anything I could tell you tonight. He did not skip the honest part. He did not rush straight to whatever you want, Lord, while hiding his real heart. He let his fear be fully spoken first, and then he trusted, which means you are allowed to do the same. You are allowed to tell God exactly how much you do not want the thing you are facing. You are allowed to ask out loud for it to pass. That honesty is not the opposite of faith. In this garden, it was faith. You do not have to feel brave to be faithful. You only have to be honest, and then, when you are ready to whisper the hardest words of all, "Not my will, but yours," you are seen. You are known. You are not alone in the asking. But when he lifted his head from that first prayer and went back to his friends, he found them fast asleep. Chapter 5. Could you not watch 1 hour? There is a special kind of loneliness that comes not from being abandoned by strangers, but from being left alone by the very people you love most, at the very moment you need them most. And that loneliness fell on Jesus now, in the dark. He rose from the ground after that first agonizing prayer, and he made his way back the short distance to where he had left Peter, James, and John. And he found them asleep. The 3 who had promised him only hours before that they would follow him anywhere, that they would die with him if it came to that. The 3 he had asked so simply to stay awake and watch with me had drifted off under the olive trees. Their eyes were heavy, the gospel gently explains, worn out by grief and by the late hour and by the wine of the Passover meal. They were not villains. They were just exhausted, ordinary, failing men who could not manage to stay awake for their friend on the one night it mattered most. And Jesus woke them, and his words are so full of ache. He turned to Peter, big, loud, confident Peter, who had sworn the loudest of all, and he said, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" 1 hour. That was all he had asked. Not to suffer for him, not to save him, just to stay awake beside him for 1 single hour, and they could not do even that. Breathe. Let that disappointment be what it is for a moment before we soften it. But listen to what he said next, because it is one of the most compassionate lines in all of Scripture, and it tells you everything about his heart. He did not rage at them. He did not shame them. He looked at these failing, sleeping friends, and he said gently, "Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Do you hear the mercy folded into that? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Even in his own agony, even as they failed him, his first move was to make an excuse for them. He saw the willingness in their hearts, and he understood the weakness of their tired bodies, and he was tender with the gap between the two. He knew they meant to be faithful. He knew they simply could not manage it, and he loved them in their failing. Rest here. Let that mercy settle over you. And there is something in this scene that speaks directly to the particular loneliness of the middle of the night. Because notice, Jesus went back to his friends 3 separate times, and 3 times he found them sleeping. He kept returning to them. Even knowing they would fail him again, even after the first disappointment and the second, he still walked back through the dark to be near them. He did not write them off. He did not decide, after the first sleeping, that he would face the rest utterly alone and never look for their company again. 3 times he came back toward the warmth of human nearness, even when that nearness kept letting him down. There is a stubborn, aching love in that. He wanted his people close, right to the end, flawed and failing as they were. Breathe. Let that tenderness sit in the quiet for a moment. Because here is something you may need to hear tonight, if you are carrying not only fear, but guilt. The guilt of having fallen asleep, in some sense, on your own watch, of having failed someone you love, of having promised more than you could deliver, and then coming up short in the moment it counted, of being willing in spirit, but so very weak in the flesh. If that is you, then hear how Jesus spoke to his sleeping friends, and know that this is how he speaks to you. Not with contempt, not with a list of your failures, but with understanding for the exhausted, willing, weak human heart. He knows you meant well. He knows how tired you are. He knows the distance between the person you long to be and the person you managed to be today. And he is gentle with that distance. You are not condemned tonight. You are understood. And then, without bitterness, without a word of blame, he turned and went back into the dark to pray again, alone, as he had known all along he would be. Chapter 6. The sweat like drops of blood. Here we come to the deepest and strangest place in the whole garden, the moment the old readers approached almost on their knees, and the moment some, over the centuries, wished they could quietly remove from the story altogether. And I want us to look at it slowly and gently and without fear. Jesus went back and prayed the same prayer a second time, and then a third. "Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." The words shift a little each time, and if you listen closely you can hear something happening in them. The first cry was mostly, "Take this from me." By the third, it has become mostly, "Your will be done." The prayer did not remove the cup, but it was slowly, agonizingly, moving his heart from please, no, toward yes, Father. This was not a single, easy surrender. It was a battle, fought 3 times over, on the ground, in the dark, alone. Breathe. Let that be true for a moment. That surrender is often not one clean choice, but the same hard prayer prayed again and again and again, until the heart finally catches up to it. And it is here in Luke's account that we come to the detail that has stunned believers for 2,000 years. Luke, who by an old tradition was a physician, a man who noticed bodies and symptoms, records 2 things the other writers do not. First, he says that an angel appeared from heaven and strengthened him. Think of that. In his deepest hour, the Son of God was ministered to by an angel, sent not to rescue him from the suffering, but to give him the strength to endure it. Sometimes heaven's answer to our agony is not to take the cup away, but to send us the strength to drink it. And second, Luke tells us that as Jesus prayed in anguish, his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Rest here for a moment. Let that image sit in the quiet, as terrible and as holy as it is. Stay with the angel for a moment longer, because there is comfort hidden there. When the strengthening came, it did not come as an escape hatch. The angel did not lift Jesus up and carry him away from the garden. The angel did not make the cup disappear, or soften what was coming, or answer the question of why. The angel simply came near and gave strength, enough strength for the next hour, and the next, and the one after that. And that is so often the exact shape of the help heaven sends us in our own hardest nights. Not the removal of the thing we dread, not an explanation that makes it all make sense, but a quiet strengthening from somewhere beyond ourselves that lets us take the next breath, and then the next, and somehow keep going through what we were sure we could not survive. If you have ever made it through a night you did not think you could make it through, and could not quite say how, perhaps you know more about that angel than you realize. Breathe. Let that comfort settle in. Physicians have a name for this rare condition, where a person under unimaginable stress and terror sweats blood through the skin. It is called hematidrosis, and it is documented in the extremity of human dread. Whether Luke meant it exactly so, or meant that the sweat fell as heavily and thickly as blood, the point is the same, and it is overwhelming. This was real anguish, real human terror, pressed to the very edge of what a body can bear. The oil press was doing its work. Under the crushing weight of what was coming, the man in the garden was being pressed, and what ran out of him was not oil, but sweat and blood, soaking into the cold ground. Now, here at last we can answer the mystery the hook left open. Why were some teachers over the centuries tempted to soften this scene, to explain it away? Because it is genuinely hard. There were those in the early centuries of the Church, and these are real and ongoing conversations among people of deep faith, who could not accept that God could truly tremble, truly dread, truly sweat blood in fear. Surely, they thought, the Divine One only appeared to suffer. Surely it was a performance for our benefit, not a real ordeal. And the great teachers of the Church fought that idea with everything they had. Because if Jesus did not really fear, if he did not really shrink from the cup, if the anguish was only play-acting, then he did not really go where we go. He did not really touch the bottom of human dread. And a Savior who never truly feared could never truly meet you in your fear. So the Church insisted, and rightly, on the harder and more beautiful truth. He was really afraid. He really trembled. The blood really fell. And that is not an embarrassment to be hidden. It is the whole point. Because it means that when you are lying awake tonight, gripped by a dread you cannot name, sweating in the dark over what tomorrow holds, you are not somewhere he has never been. He has knelt exactly there. He knows the taste of that terror from the inside, and he did not run from it. He is not ashamed of your fear, because he has felt it in his own body. You are not alone. You never were. And then, having drunk the whole bitter cup of dread down to its dregs, Jesus rose from the ground, and everything changed. Chapter 7. He rose and went to meet them. There is a moment in the deepest surrender when something turns, when the trembling stops, not because the danger is gone, but because the fight inside is finally finished. That moment came now in the garden, and it is one of the most quietly powerful turns in the whole story. Jesus rose from the ground. The praying was over. The battle in the dark had been fought, and in some deep and hidden way, won. Not won by escaping the cup, but won by accepting it. And the man who stood up from that cold earth was different from the man who had fallen onto it. The trembling had given way to a terrible calm. He had begged for another way, and there was no other way. And now he had made his peace with that all the way down to the bottom of his soul. From this moment on, through everything that followed, the arrest, the trials, the mockery, the whips, the nails, you will not find him pleading again. He had done all his pleading here, in the garden, in the dark, before any of it began. He faced the rest with a settled quiet, because he had already won the hardest battle where no one was watching. Breathe. Let that turn settle into you. The victory came in the garden, in the dark, alone, long before the crowds ever saw a thing. We do not often think of surrender as a victory. We are trained to think the opposite, that giving in is losing, that the strong are the ones who fight to the last, who never yield, who refuse the cup no matter what. But the garden turns that upside down. The strongest thing Jesus did that night was not to resist, it was to yield, to say with his whole trembling being, "Your will be done," and to mean it. And it did not make him weak. It made him unshakable, because a person who has already surrendered the outcome to God has nothing left that fear can use against them. They have already let go of the one thing fear grips hardest, the need to control how the story ends. That is why he could face the torches without flinching. He had already handed everything over in the dark. There was nothing left to take from him that he had not already freely given. Rest here. Let that quiet strength be near you tonight. He went back to his friends one last time and found them sleeping still, and this time there was no rebuke. There was no time left for it. "Are you still sleeping and resting?" he said. "Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." And even as he spoke, across the garden, through the trees, a light was moving. Torches, a whole crowd of them, coming up the hillside in the dark, soldiers and temple guards and officials, armed with swords and clubs. And leading them, walking ahead of them toward the man he had eaten with only hours before, was Judas. Rest here for a moment. Let the torches come slowly through the trees. Picture it as it must have looked from the garden. The disciples, jolted awake, blinking, confused, hearing the tramp of many feet and the clink of weapons coming up the hillside. The flicker of torchlight moving between the trunks of the olive trees, throwing long shadows that swayed and lurched. The low murmur of an armed crowd. And at the front of it all, a familiar face. Judas, one of the 12, who had sat at the table with them just hours before, who had eaten the bread from the same dish. The betrayal did not come from a stranger. It came from a friend. It came from inside the circle, and somehow that is the sharpest edge of the whole scene, that the hand which pointed him out to the soldiers was a hand he had washed that very night. Breathe. Let that ache be named, and then let it soften into the quiet. And here is the thing that should undo us. Jesus did not run. He did not hide among the olive trees, though he knew that grove better than anyone. He did not slip away into the dark, as he easily could have. He rose and went to meet them. He walked toward the torches. Judas came close and greeted him with a kiss, the sign he had arranged to mark out which man to seize, and Jesus received even that betrayal without violence, calling him still friend. When one of the disciples finally woke enough to fight, drawing a sword and striking off a man's ear, Jesus stopped him and healed the wounded man with a touch, even as they came to arrest him. To the very end, in the very moment of his own capture, he was still healing, still gentle, still pouring out the oil. Why has this garden been, in a way, overlooked, passed over quickly on the road to the louder drama of the cross? Perhaps because it is so quiet and so interior. There is no spectacle here. The greatest battle of the story was fought lying face down in the dirt, in words, in tears, with no audience but a few sleeping men and the silent stars. But make no mistake, this was where it was won. The cross was the carrying out of a decision. The decision itself was made here in Gethsemane in the dark. By the time the torches arrived, the real victory was already behind him. And that quiet, hidden victory has something to say to you tonight, in your own dark and unwitnessed hour. Chapter 8. Why this garden is for you tonight. We have walked all the way into the deepest part of the garden and stood as close to that anguish as we dared. Now let us turn gently and let this whole ancient night turn to face you, right where you are lying in the dark. Because this was never only a story about a man in a grove of olive trees 2,000 years ago. In a very real sense, this night was for tonight. For you, for whatever dread you carried to bed. And here at the end are the things I most want to place into your hands as you drift towards sleep. The first is this: your fear does not disqualify you. We are taught, somewhere along the way, that faith means never being afraid, that the strong and the holy sail through their trials with untroubled hearts, and that our trembling is a sign of how far we have fallen short. But then we come to this garden, and we find the holiest one who ever lived face down on the ground, sweating blood, begging for another way. If Jesus was allowed to be afraid, if he was allowed to shake and plead and want the cup to pass, then so are you. Your dread tonight is not a failure of faith. It is simply the human heart doing what the human heart does in the dark. You can be terrified and faithful at the same time. He was. You are in the best of company. Breathe. Let that free you just a little from the weight of having to be brave. The second is this, and it is the tender heart of the whole night. You are not alone in your garden. Whatever you are facing that presses hardest at this hour, the fear you cannot name, the outcome you dread, the cup you would give anything to have pass from you, you are not facing it somewhere he has never been. He has knelt in the dark and dreaded the morning. He has asked for the cup to pass and heard only silence in return. He has felt his closest friends fall asleep when he needed them most. There is no corner of your fear tonight where his footprints are not already pressed into the ground ahead of you. And that means when you pray your own trembling prayer into the dark, you are not praying to a distant God who cannot understand. You are praying to the one who prayed it first. And the third is the quiet gift hidden in his prayer itself. He showed you how to pray when you are afraid. You do not have to hide your fear from God, or dress it up, or pretend it is smaller than it is. You may tell him the whole truth. Take this cup from me. I do not want this. Please, if there is any other way, say it as plainly as he said it, and then only when you are ready, not forced, not rushed, but when your heart is finally able, you may whisper the words that turned everything, yet not my will, but yours. Not because you have stopped being afraid, but because you have decided to trust the one who holds the cup, even in the dark, even without understanding. That is not a prayer you have to get right tonight. It may take 3 tries, like his. It may take 300. He understands the battle of it. He fought it himself. So hear it now as softly as it can be said. You are allowed to be afraid tonight. You are allowed to ask for the hard thing to pass. And you are not for one moment, alone in the asking. You are seen, you are known, you are held, you are loved, you are safe. The one who knelt in the garden kneels beside you now. And there is one last quiet gift to carry down into sleep. Remember what the garden was called, the oil press. Remember that the good thing, the precious thing, the oil that lit the lamps and healed the wounds and anointed the kings, came only through the crushing. It is a hard truth, and I will not pretend it away or wrap it in a bow. But there is comfort folded inside it for anyone being pressed tonight. The crushing was not the end of the story in that garden, and it may not be the end of yours. Something was being brought forth under that weight that could not have come any other way. You cannot always see from inside the press what is being pressed out of you, but you are not merely being crushed. You are, perhaps, being made into something that will one day give light and healing and blessing to others who kneel in their own dark gardens. The pressing is real, but so is the oil. Breathe. Let that hope rest gently over the fear. Let your breathing slow all the way down. Let your shoulders drop. Let this ancient night, and the one who watched through it, carry you the rest of the way into rest. Closing in prayer, we have walked with him tonight. We have crossed the dark valley and entered the garden called the oil press and knelt among the ancient trees. We have heard the most honest prayer ever prayed. Take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours. We have seen the sweat fall like blood, and an angel come not to rescue, but to strengthen, and a Saviour rise from the dirt with a terrible calm and walk out to meet the torches. And we have learned that the greatest battle of the whole story was fought lying face down in the dark, with no one awake to see it. And if there is one thing to carry out of this garden and down into sleep, let it be this. Your fear is not the end of your faith. Your trembling does not push you away from God. It lays you down in the very place where he once trembled too. The one who was afraid in the garden is not ashamed of your fear tonight. He is near it. He is near you, and he is not too late, and he is not too far, and he will not fall asleep on his watch over you. Let us pray. Father, we come to you now in the quiet of this late hour, carrying fears we have not spoken to anyone. We thank you that your Son knelt in a garden and was afraid, that he trembled and pleaded, and sweat drops like blood, and did not pretend to be fine. We thank you that because of that dark night, there is no fear of ours you do not understand from the inside. Tonight we bring you the cups we wish would pass, the dread of tomorrow, the weight we cannot put down, the outcomes we cannot control. We tell you honestly that we do not want them, and we ask, as he taught us, for another way, if there is one. But where there is no other way, give us what the angel gave him, not always escape, but the strength to endure, and your nearness in the dark. Teach our frightened hearts to whisper slowly, as many times as it takes, not my will, but yours. And let us rest tonight in the arms of the one who stays awake and watches and never leaves. Sleep now, beloved. You are held. You are loved. You are safe. You are not afraid alone, and you are not alone at all. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. This is Night Psalms, and we will walk with you again soon. Good night. Amen.